Hi, this is Margaret from the blog Don't Call It Bollywood, and this is my weekly box office post, and also my undoing my braid while I talk post. It's been a few weeks, so there's a lot of stuff to catch up on. Let's see, I think 2 weeks ago, Geetha in Trouble released. This is the most successful and highest budget Pakistani film in history, which isn't as remarkable as it sounds. The Pakistani film industry has just been reinvigorated in the past few years, and essentially every other movie is the most successful and expensive Pakistani film in history because they haven't made that many. But Geetha in Trouble I found slightly interesting in how the box office played out. It did better than Pakistani films have done before globally, which still wasn't terribly impressive, but it did especially well in Canada, Australia, and Europe. Now, Europe makes sense, sort of, because it was released close to Eid, and there is a largish Pakistani population in Europe. Canada and Australia I found more interesting, and partly because I'd actually seen the film, I came up with a theory. The film felt very Punjabi to me. It felt very similar to Punjabi films that I have seen in the past. So I'm wondering if perhaps it's doing well in those regions, not because it's Pakistani or anything about that, but because it is Punjabi. And therefore the Punjabi audience, even though they are of Indian origin in Canada and Australia, are relating to a Punjabi Pakistani film. Let's see, what other movies came out? Surma did not do terribly well. Let's see. Weekend before last, it was just a whole bunch of flops and not very good pictures, which is fine. That's what you would expect the weekend before a major holiday. And then we had Independence Weekend. Oh, right. Vishwarapan 2 did not do nearly as well as expected. It was kind of a record-breakingly bad film in terms of the international market, which is interesting because Mulk, which is essentially the complete opposite of Vishwarapam 2, did better than expected. It still didn't do well, but it did better and it held on longer than Vishwarapam 2, which I find encouraging just in terms of the international market is swinging more towards a curiosity about other cultures and openness towards them instead of violence and so on. And then finally, there's last weekend, Independence Weekend. We had Gold and we had Sacham of Jayati, the two big Hindi releases, which are both extremely patriotic and slightly different in tone. Gold is another Akshay Kumar sort of soft patriotism film. It's a little more interesting, to me at least, than some of his previous films and a bit higher quality, mostly because it's a better producer and a better director. Rima Kakti is a wonderful director with a very clear vision of the stories she wants to tell. And of course, Farhan Akhtar and his team is very good at releasing a good film. So, Gold is the film with the higher quality going into the weekend. Sacham of Jayati is more of your standard potboiler action film. Gold did better than Sacham of Jayati, which is the headline most people are going with. However, the true story to me is that Geetha Godavara, is that it? Yes, Geetha Godavara is doing better than both of them. The Telugu film is dominating the Hindi films. It is doing spectacularly well. Not just in America, where Telugu films always do well, but also in the UK and Australia, where they usually don't do that well, and even Canada. So, if you look at the box office, what you start to notice is a pattern of the places where Gold did less well than expected, America, Canada, Australia, etc., are the places where the new Telugu film is doing better than you might expect. Meanwhile, Sacham of Jayati is doing steady business across the board. So that's telling me Sacham of Jayati is not the one that's poking into the Gold box office and keeping it lower than expectations. It is the Telugu film that is eating away at the Hindi film market, which is fascinating. This is not the first time this has happened. Arjun Reddy had a somewhat similar pattern. Bahubali obviously very much had this pattern. And it seems to be something that's going to just keep coming up more and more often, especially in the international markets. As I see it, it's because the international markets have come of age. A lot of people in these international locations are now second generation or else first generation who grew up speaking English in preparation for an international career. Meaning, for that population, watching a Hindi film, which may be their familiar language, with English subtitles is very similar to watching a non-Hindi film also with English subtitles. It's the English subtitles that will be their primary method of translation for these films. The other thing is, of course, the Hindi films have been getting farther and farther away from what the audience might be looking for. This new Telugu release is a rom-com. There hasn't been a major Hindi rom-com yet, possibly this year even. And opposite it, we have yet another patriotic sports biopic historical and yet another violent action film. We've had many, many of those from the Hindi industry this year and very few rom-coms. So if I'm an audience member looking at my films and I am in the international market, I won't care quite as much about language because language doesn't matter to me as much anymore. I'm also not going to care quite as much about venue because in the international market, films in all languages are playing next to each other in the same theaters. You might even see a poster or a trailer for a film in a different language while watching your Hindi film. There's no division there. So you're going to make your choice based on what kind of movie you want to see at that moment. And it's going to be genre-based. And if it's genre-based, there is only one rom-com that is available, and it doesn't happen to be in Hindi this week. This is especially interesting because it happened Independence Day weekend, which is, of course, traditionally a release date for patriotic films because it's Independence Day. But then the question is, in the global market, does that even really matter that much anymore? Yes, it might be a day to remember your Indian roots. There's all sorts of Indian ethnic festivals and so on going on everywhere, but you may not necessarily care as much about, honoring the Indian history, the Indian sports achievements, the Indian army, the Indian police, and so on and so forth, because you're now in a different place and you have a different army and a different sports team and so on and so forth. It's the rom-coms that hit at the feel of being in India that might appeal to you on this weekend. You want the cultural identity, not the political one. Anyway, that's how it looks to me. You can agree, you can disagree. Just leave me a comment on my blog. There's a related post right below that has a lot more figures and details and so on. Look forward to hearing from you there. Thanks. Bye.